That's the most important thing. If you recognize the personality, and because you recognize the personality, you get caught up in this business of, well, I'm going to change the way I am.
Okay.
That's a mistake. And the reason it's a mistake, and the reason that that's unseen for what it is because you don't notice, if you say, I'm going to change the way I am, that it's the same you that you say you're going to change that's talking about changing the way you are. It's the same you, right? And so that's why they say in France, the more things change, the more they stay the same, because there are people who commit their lives to changing themselves, to become a better person somehow, some way, either in terms of their performance or in terms of their moral character, in terms of their habits, in terms of their diet, in terms of their nasty egotistical habits. And it's understandable to want to change if you recognize that you're creating a lot of mischief, you're creating a lot of trouble in your life unnecessarily. However, it just doesn't work to do that. It just doesn't work to do that. That's still living in the domain of the personality in terms of it being a self-improvement project. I'm going to be a better person. No, that's not what this is. And so that's why the way this works is, upon noticing the personality, you do nothing. You simply maintain an awareness of the personality. And if you maintain an awareness of the personality, there will be a witness to the personality's dysfunction. Do you understand? If you're paying attention to the personality, there will be a witness of the personality's dysfunction. You will become an audience to the personality causing unnecessary suffering for yourself and for other people. Right? This is the process, to simply stay aware and see what's happening. And because you're aware of what's happening, the awareness itself brings about the adjustments necessary. The awareness itself brings about the adjustments necessary. If you look at the way a high-level professional sports performer works, it's the same thing. After the game, the coach and the player look at slow motion video of what they did. And when they look at slow motion video of what they did, the coach will say to the player, what do you see? You're looking at a video of your underperforming. You're looking at a video of your making mistakes that resulted in your not being as effective or successful as you can be at the sport. You have the ability, right? So now we're looking at the video to see what happened, what's happening. And the coach will say to the player, what do you see? What do you see? And if the player sees, right, where the ineffective areas are in terms of the position of the body, in terms of the way the player is interacting with the other players, whatever it is, right? All that's necessary is for the player to see that. This is very important, because if the coach then says to the player, and I'm sure this happens, if the coach then says to the player, oh, you screwed up. You see how you screwed up? You see what you didn't do? You see the mistakes you're making here? You're going to have to work harder. You're going to have to work harder. You're going to have to train yourself not to make those mistakes. That's the way a lot of coaching is done, I'm sure, right? That's ineffective. That's ineffective. That's not very skillful. That's not skillful means. Skillful means is to say to the player, can you see? Can you see what's happened? Can you see what's happening? And if the player notices what's happening, fine. That's all. That's the beginning and the end of it. That's it.
But the goal is still change.
Change is a constant. It doesn't need to be a goal. So it's a matter of paying attention to the ego, not in order for the ego to be awake or the ego to be a better ego or for the ego to be more awake, right? No, to pay attention to the ego, to see what's happening. Yes, it is the case that you still have to, the professional player still has to work with the body he has. That's what he's got. He's got that body, right? Still has to play the game in the rules that the game is played. All the other factors and situational realities still exist, okay? But to see what's happening, not from the ego or not from the idea of changing anything or improving anything, to see what's happening just to notice, the light of awareness gets the job done. You don't have to be concerned about change. This is the misconception. You don't have to be concerned about change. You can't stop change. Change is a constant. There's nothing you can do about change. Impermanence is a matter of things changing, is it not? Impermanence means that things are changing all the time. You can't stop change. It's not a question of controlling change or stopping change or starting change. That's already always happening. It's a question of what direction will the change go in. That's what the awareness is influencing. The awareness is influencing how what changes. In the light of awareness, what changes in order to be consistent with the truth. In the light of awareness, what changes in order to be consistent with the truth. That just naturally happens. It just naturally happens. Therefore, there's nothing that needs to happen other than to simply be aware. And is it not what we're practicing when you're practicing meditation? Simply being aware. Not just being aware, but being aware that you're aware. Being aware that you're aware. This goes back to what I was saying earlier about the person that says, no, I don't remember who I am all the time, but when I need to, I do. Right? That's because the person is aware that they're aware. That need only happen one time. That needs to only happen one time, that you become aware that you're aware. You become aware that you're awareness, right? If that happens, if you have that experience, and one of the things that I've been saying here is, please stop being involved with the masses who keep paying attention to these teachers who talk about these uncalled for experiences in which they had a total enlightenment. That's not useful to look at it that way. It's not useful at all to look at it that way. It's much more useful to look at it from the standpoint that you are already what you are. It's absolutely possible for that experience to be the experience that you're having all the time. It's absolutely possible for that to be the case. And in order for that to be the case, it has to be, see, if it's not going to happen that you're going to get struck by lightning, if that's not going to happen, that you're going to get struck by lightning and you're going to have the Eckhart Tolle experience, or the Ramana Maharshi experience, if that's not going to happen, and probably it's not going to happen, right? If that's not going to happen, then maybe if you understand what the experience of that is in terms of what is happening when that happens. What's happening is the person is having a recognition of their true nature, is it not? The person is seeing the truth. The person is seeing who they are. The person is being who they are. That's what's happening, right? Right? So if you're not going to get struck by lightning for that to happen, maybe if you come to a deep understanding of what it is that's happening, and maybe if you come to a deep understanding of what your true nature actually is, what it would be like to be you, and you're convinced of it, right? Maybe if you're convinced of it and you have a deep enough understanding, right, you'll be able to start to be that way. Doesn't that make sense? You'll be able to start to be that way. If you understand, for example, right, if you understand through the teachings and through the understandings, and that's why the understandings are so important. If you understand that through the teachings and through the understandings, that who you would naturally be, who you would naturally be is somebody who would naturally act in your best interest and in the best interest of all other people. That's your nature. That's who you would actually be. That's totally consistent with what you just said. Yeah. Now, obviously, everybody's heard the phrase, fake it until you make it, right? Yeah, so obviously, if you understand the truth and you know what your true nature is and you know what that would look like and you know how you would be if you were being that way, while you're being that way and when you're being that way, looking to see that space of awareness, right? So you're not just acting as if, but you're acting consistent with the truth, and you want to notice how that's so when you're acting consistent with the truth, right? When you're acting that way, you're going to have resistance by the already existing program, right? Yeah, when you're acting, when you set goals and the way you're behaving is consistent with what it would be to have a healthy body, right? Your mind is still going to try and stop it, right? It's going to say, no, you don't feel like that. You don't feel like it today. You don't feel like it today. You can afford to miss one day. Don't waste the pressing through it on becoming a better personality. Don't waste the pressing through it on becoming a better personality. Have the pressing through it be a function of your seeing the truth of yourself, knowing who you really are, and not allowing your mind to stop you. Otherwise you're shorting yourself. You're underselling yourself. You're saying I am this limited physical body and I am this mind, right? And I have to keep beating myself up, or I have to keep forcing myself or pushing myself in order to be a good person, a better person, the person I could be. There's nothing wrong with that, but why put that energy out to be a better person when you can be putting that energy out to come to the realization of who you actually are, which is already the case, and thereby getting to a place where the expression of that becomes natural and effortlessness, and becomes natural and effortless. So you don't have to try and be a good person anymore, you just are. Yeah? That's the goal, right? The goal is to not have to remember who you are, right? To know who you are sufficiently, to be convinced of it, to be practicing it consistently enough that it starts to become effortless. It starts to replace who you were. And that is not a project that you have to pay attention to in terms of the details. All you have to do is stay awake. That's the beauty of this. All you have to do is stay awake. What does that mean? No matter what's going on, right? No matter what's going on, are you the witness of that, or are you what's going on? If the person is having a bad day, are you having a bad day? Or are you aware of there being a person having a bad day? That's two different worlds. The awareness is who you are. And if the awareness is the truth and the awareness is who you are, then no matter what's going on with the person, that's not you. That's what this is about. That's what this is about. That's what this whole thing is about. That's why I wrote my book. The whole purpose, the whole focus of that book was one point, one single point. To discover what you're not. To discover what you're not. To discover who you really are means to discover what you're not. And once you discover what you're not, you can be aware of what you're not, but you're not that. So the body, see, and this is the thing. The other thing that has to happen in order for this to work is you have to accept life. One of the reasons that the ego suffers is the ego rejects life, doesn't it? Yeah, the ego rejects life. And so you have to understand that who you really are, right? The awareness that you really are doesn't reject life. Everything is okay as it is. It doesn't reject life. But the ego rejects life, right? So you have to understand that when you're aware of who you are and you're not being the ego will still continue to say no and struggle and suffer and try and get your attention to participate in that drama. And to the extent that you consistently stay in the position of the awareness, stay in the position of the witness, right? Gradually that drama will begin to settle down on its own because you're just not playing. That's what Mooji calls this. He says, stay as the truth. Stay as the awareness. Stay as the isness. That's what he's saying when he says stay as the isness. He's saying don't get involved with the ego. Don't get involved with the voice in your head when it's being crazy. Right? When it's being crazy. You can notice it's being crazy. You don't have to involve yourself. You don't have to get into the craziness. You can just notice it's crazy. See, and that's the thing. The acceptance of life is necessary in order to have a ground to stand on, to be present to what the ego does. The acceptance of life is necessary in order to have a ground to stand on, to be present to what the ego does. Why? Because the ego gets crazy, doesn't it? And that's uncomfortable, isn't it? Yeah, and when it gets crazy and that's uncomfortable, it's trying to pull you into it. It's trying to pull you in. Trying to get you to say, I'm uncomfortable. It's trying to get you to say, I'm going crazy. It's trying to get you to say, I'm out of control. I need to control this. I want to control this. It's trying to get you to do that, right? But if you don't do that and you stay in your seat, you stay seated, you stay in the truth, you stay identified with the reality of what you are, and from that view you see what's going on, right? It can't maintain itself. It can't maintain itself. The question is, for most people, the question is two things. One, will you consistently stay in the process of being grounded and being aware? Will you consistently stay in that process? That's the challenge, right? That's the hard part. That's the part about consistently practicing meditation. It's the part about consistently studying the understandings and so forth. Will you stay in the process of that until things loosen up, until you have enough space, until you have enough freedom that it's not so difficult, it's not so challenging. In the beginning, it's challenging. The most difficult thing in the whole process of self-realization is getting to the point where you're close to actually experiencing being yourself, because that's when the ego will use everything that it has within its ability to stop the process. So that's when the ego will produce mind attacks. That's when the ego will try and shake your convictions. That's when the ego will produce physical symptoms. That's when the ego will produce tiredness. It'll produce anxiety, right? It'll produce confusion, right? And the question is, can you stay awake and stay present as those things arise? They will pass. If you stay present to those things when they arise, they will pass. Earlier, if you attempt to change it, you then are identified with it, and then you're lost. If you attempt to change it, you're identified with it, and then you're lost. Right? And it's not necessary to change it, right? Why? Now I'll take it all the way to the bottom line. It's not necessary to change it. Why? I'll take it all the way to the bottom line. Because it doesn't even exist. Right? What are we talking about? But if you go back to the bottom line, right? Is it necessary to change something or struggle with something or make something different that doesn't even exist? And it's the reason why the world continues to go as it goes, because what you're describing is how real it all seems, and how inevitable it seems that we have to deal with it. We have to act. We have to take action in order to deal with the challenges that we face in our lives. I understand completely that that's the appearance, that's the way the whole thing appears. All right, I'm going to end with a story to address what you're speaking about, right? There was these two monks that were walking, and they came upon a puddle of water, and they looked down in the puddle, and there was a scorpion in the puddle, and the scorpion was on its back, trying to turn itself over. Right? So one of the monks goes over and picks the scorpion up and turns it over and sets it down, and while he's doing that, the scorpion bit him. So then they're walking, and the other monk says, "Why did you pick the scorpion up? You know it's a scorpion, he's going to bite you, right?" And the monk says, "The scorpion did what it what its nature is to do, and I did what my nature is to do.
Okay.
Okay?